All right, so we are going to continue looking today at interactions among living things. And we had started talking about symbiosis last class and symbiotic relationships. So a symbiotic relationship or symbiosis, this is whenever we see different living things living closely together where the relationship may benefit one or both living things. And the three major types we talked about last class were parasitism, mutualism, and commensalism. And note that these relationships, they are different from competition and they're different from a predator-prey relationship. So a predator-prey relationship, that's when a predator will consume the prey. In a parasitistic case, a parasite does not want to kill the host. The parasite needs the host to thrive off of the host, but the host is getting harmed. All right, but technically not being killed. It'll make them sicker, it'll make them weaker, but the parasite wants the host to survive so that the parasite can continue to survive. All right, so parasitism, one species is benefiting, that would be the parasite. The other species is being harmed, that is called the host. And next was mutualism. We talked about how a mutualistic relationship is in which both species benefit. We had done these two examples. Here we have this wasp or bee and plants or flowers, and they help with pollination. The bee gets nectar. Here we have the sea anemone and the clownfish. The clownfish is getting protection, and the sea anemone is getting food, mostly from the waste that's produced from the clownfish. Then commensalism, this was a relationship in which one species benefits and the other neither benefits nor is harmed. So this example we looked at was a remora fish. It attaches to a shark, and it's going to use the shark for transportation, and it's also going to eat all the food that is left over from the shark. So the remora gets food and transportation. The shark is not benefiting, but neither is it being harmed. So that's commensalism. So this chart we had looked at last class just reviewed those three types of symbiosis. So mutualism, both are happy. They are both benefiting. The example, a sea anemone and a clownfish. Then we see the commensalism. One benefits, the other is unaffected. Another example of that would be whales and barnacles. And then parasitism, one benefits, the other is harmed. Another example here is the dog. The dog is the host, and the parasite in this case is the tick. All right, there are a few videos here we're going to watch on symbiosis, but before we do that, I just want to talk about adaptations a little bit here. So an adaptation it's an inherited characteristic, and it helps an organism survive and reproduce in its environment. So any sort of adaptation that an organism has, that's going to help it survive in its environment. So there are physical adaptations. So an example here are different beaks. These are physical or structural adaptations. So if we look at, for example, this one here, that's a red-tailed hawk. It has a short, strong beak or bill, and it's hooked shaped for tearing into flesh. If we look at this one, great blue heron, spear-like bill for jabbing fish, frogs, and shellfish. So notice how different birds have different beaks adapted for their environment. So those are called physical adaptations. There are also behavioral adaptations. So behaviors such as mating behaviors, migrating, that would be a behavior, hibernating would be a behavior. This example I've shown here, this is a white-tailed antelope squirrel, and it will make these burrows underground, which helps keep the squirrel cool. So that would be a behavioral adaptation. All right, and then as we get to further classes, you'll learn that only species that are best suited to their environment will survive. And if they survive, they're able to reproduce. If they reproduce, then they're passing on their genetics to their offspring. And then over time, the successful characteristics will be more common in that population. All right, and then we'll have one video here on adaptations.
Presents What is symbiosis? Normally when people talk about symbiosis, they're talking about two different types of organisms cooperating to help each other survive. For example, clownfish hide from predators among the tentacles of sea anemones. In return, they feed the anemone with their own droppings. Yum yum. The anemone and the clownfish enjoy a symbiotic relationship. In biology, however, symbiosis has a broader definition than simple cooperation. It's classically defined as any long-term living together of unlike organisms. Let me say that again. Symbiosis, the long-term living together of unlike organisms. Mutualistic symbiosis, or mutualism, is when both partners benefit from the relationship, like we saw in the clownfish and the anemone. When I say that both partners benefit from the relationship, what I mean is that both organisms experience a significant increase in evolutionary fitness. They both end up being better at surviving and reproducing. Parasitic symbiosis, or parasitism, is when one benefits while the other is harmed. Ticks are a good example of a parasite. They drink your blood and then sometimes repay you with Lyme disease. Total jerks. Commensalistic symbiosis, or commensalism, is when one organism benefits while the other is not dramatically helped or harmed. Squirrels live in oak trees. They sometimes eat bark, leaf buds, and of course, they love to eat acorns. They consume the flesh of the oak tree's unborn children. This is great for the squirrel, of course, but surely this must be bad for the tree's evolutionary fitness, right? Well, multiple studies have shown that the relationship between oak trees and squirrels is both extremely complex and extremely ancient, apparently stretching back millions of years. Both organisms are trapped in an evolutionary arms race against each other. Through the ongoing process of descent with modification, acted upon by selection, oak trees have evolved many tricks to control the behavior and population size of their ancient, furry rivals. Among other things, the tree has evolved to produce toxins inside of its seeds. Squirrels, in return, have evolved a digestive system that can handle the toxins fairly well, but more importantly, squirrels have changed their behavior. When they find fresh acorns, instead of eating them, they stash them in shallow hiding places to let rainwater detoxify them over several weeks to several months. A single squirrel can make hundreds of stashes all over its territory every single year. If the squirrel dies before eating the acorns or simply forgets where some of them were hidden, the squirrel has, in effect, planted brand new trees, often in places far enough from the parent tree that there will be no parent-offspring competition for sunlight when the saplings begin to grow. This is called seed dispersal, and it's actually good for a tree's evolutionary fitness. It helps them produce more successful offspring. While it's difficult to perfectly calculate evolutionary fitness, there are so many unknown variables involved, it appears that right now, in the middle of this crazy evolutionary arms race, many trees either break even or sometimes experience an overall fitness gain when those pesky squirrels move into their branches. Here we see that there exists a symbiotic continuum from parasite to mutualist. Symbiotic relationships can and do change dramatically over time. Even ticks, which almost all of us consider to be horrible parasites, when they're not carrying diseases, sometimes act more like commensalists than parasites. Due to their small size, they take very little blood from their donors. This means that a single tick won't usually cause a noteworthy fitness decline in its host. Results from a recent study show that possums may actually benefit from tick infestations. This is because they snack on ticks, and a single possum may eat over 5,000 ticks per week during tick season. Now, ticks are really small, but 5,000 per week. That is a noteworthy supplement to the possum's regular diet. Ticks are sort of like little sack lunches that come directly to you, free delivery. It might seem silly that biologists invented a word, symbiosis, to encompass everything from parasites to cooperators, but the reason for this is that parasites can evolve to become cooperators and vice versa. Understanding these evolutionary transitions is fascinating, but more importantly, this knowledge is now helping us control diseases. For example, many of the bacteria living in your intestines actually help you digest your food. They eat the parts of it that you can't absorb, and then excrete the waste products that you can absorb. Yum yum. Most of the microbes living inside us today either have a mutualistic or a commensalistic relationship with us, but some of them started out as parasites. In 1991, a bacterial intestinal disease called cholera broke out in South America. As you may know, cholera causes extreme diarrhea. That's why it's so dangerous. It makes its host desperate to use the toilet and then spreads to new hosts either through dirty drinking water or through person-to-person contact. Biologist Paul Ewald studied its spread and the evolution of the cholera bacteria in real time. In nations with bad water filtration, the bacteria remained deadly year after year. This is because natural selection favored strains of the bacteria that would make people use the toilet more frequently, even if it eventually killed them due to dehydration, because the bacteria would contaminate more water this way and spread faster to new hosts. In countries with good water filtration, strains of the bacteria evolved toward commensalism. In these environments, natural selection favored microbes that were, quote, kinder to people because people were then healthy enough to go to school, to work, and mingle with friends and family. This allowed the bacteria to spread slowly and non-violently through human-to-human contact. The take-home message here is this. When there is an outbreak of cholera, not only should we immediately treat the sick, we should also distribute clean drinking water. Doing so will guide the bacteria's evolution in a direction that's good for the future of the people in the area. These fascinating interactions and evolutionary transitions from enemy to friend and sometimes from friend to enemy are all possible because of symbiosis, the long-term living together of unlike organisms. While most people have no trouble understanding how evolution causes animals to adapt to their environment, a bear to the cold, for example, we often forget that a creature's environment also includes the other organisms that share that environment. If two species live together and interact long enough, the slow process of evolution, descent with modification, acted upon by selection, can cause living things to evolve and adapt to each other. I am John Perry, and that is symbiosis, the long-term living together of unlike organisms, stated clearly.
Of adaptations that have evolved over time. You can find adaptations pretty much anywhere you can find life on Earth, but it's easier to learn about them when they're up close. So for this month's adaptations field trip, we are going to get up close and personal with some of these amazing adaptations of life on Earth right here at Animal Wonders, Montana. On this field trip, we have a special guide that's going to lead us through. I am here with Jessie right now.
Hi guys, I'm Jessie. I'm the director of Animal Wonders. I like to do a lot of teaching with animals, and adaptations is my favorite topic. And what I tell the kids, a very simple description of it, is something an animal has or does that helps them survive.
Having it or doing it, it's neat to think about things that are physical and things that are behavioral.
Yes, yeah, the hidden ones are some of my favorites to share.
A lot of the adaptations we see with life on Earth are all about defensive tactics.
Right, and those are sometimes like the most obvious ones as well.
We're going to actually see several individuals today, right? We're going to get few different taxonomic groups, so that's how we categorize different life on Earth.
You guys are going to see everything from mammals to birds to reptiles and amphibians and invertebrates.
Let's do it.
Let's go.
We are going to check out the adaptations for the group that is reptiles.
Meet Blueberry, the blue-tongued skink. A skink is a kind of a lizard. Generally they have a shorter, thicker neck, long body and little legs. So she has this blue tongue. It is actually a warning color, so she's mimicking animals that actually put a lot of effort into creating a poison or a toxin. So when an animal comes close, they're like, nope, warning colors, you don't want to eat me. But she has no poison or venom. She's totally tricking them. We would know very clearly if she was trying to defend herself. So she would open her mouth very wide and she would stick her tongue out, inflate it a bit, and then she would wiggle it around in the air like blah, 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 like that, being like, look at me, don't eat me.
In addition to using the tongue and making this larger display, they will also exhibit some body characteristics too, right? Flattening out or kind of presenting a different, just like that. And you can imagine that because there is so much, there's all this tissue.
Girth.
Yeah, all that girth. And so imagine if you were using that, but then putting it in different angles to be bigger.
So if those don't work, she will attempt to run away and hide into a bush, kind of like what she's doing right now. And then she's got this tail that's displayed. That's kind of like her hidden defense. So if something tries to grab her, prevent her from going into a bush, they'll grab her tail and pull, and the tail will come off. And then it has vasoconstriction very quickly. It just stops bleeding, scabs up, heals over, and then regrows itself.
Which is absurd and awesome and amazing. The next individual we are going to look at is an amphibian. Who do we have?
We have Slick the tiger salamander. Aww. He has some pretty obvious defense mechanisms, and that goes with his color here. If you take a look at his color, you'll see that while he can camouflage a bit if he's burrowed down into the dirt, if he is exposed, he has bright colors on him. Bright colors usually are a warning that they're poisonous or venomous. These guys have a poison gland underneath their tail. He would turn his tail sideways and a milky substance would come out of that poison gland, and that would be the poison. And then he'd kind of wiggle around and try and get it on his tail and his body, as much of him as he could, so that not only does he taste terrible, but he will cause quite a bellyache if he's eaten. And now we're going to be talking about some birds. This is Maui, and
all right, so for today's class then, for Science 7, if you didn't finish these two worksheets, the first worksheet is symbiotic interactions, and the second worksheet is in order to survive. Second one is on adaptations. The first one is on symbiosis. So if you didn't finish those are for homework. We will go over them next class.